Mayor Rob Harrington just hosted a 90-minute forum yesterday where he dropped his stance and news, I guess, as it relates to all the hottest topics of this summer in Charlotte. In this 90-minute forum that I've been going through line by line, he talked about, again, all the hot topics of the summer: the I-77 toll lane proposals, data centers coming to Charlotte, growth in housing affordability as we are navigating being the number one fastest growing metro in the US, teen takeovers and violence related to that, a whole host of other issues that we will be covering very briefly right now, getting into it. The biggest uh, the biggest angle or takeaway that I had from it is he repeatedly said that he does not see his role so much as taking positions, but being a convener of the city council and then also the community, and trying to help everybody work through the hot issues that we have this summer. And also listening to him, it was real interesting listening about his background and story, because that was something that I've not seen or heard previously. But the hottest topic out of all of this was 100% I-77 toll lanes southbound, as there's also this massive deadline from NCDOT and the state legislature where $300 million in funding is on the line. And the state legislature is essentially saying that if we don't do exactly what they want, we will lose the funding and owe the state $64 million. So there's definitely some tension, and is being led by I forget her name, is I think Vicky something from Iredell County, the state legislature representative for it's Iredell and then a little bit of the northern part of Mecklenburg County. Anyways, off topic. So uh, as he was talking about this, there's apparently one of the things, again, his background is actually law. So he actually was the head of the Bar Association for North Carolina, interestingly enough, now the mayor of Charlotte. And he mentioned that there's a 90-day safe harbor period during which I believe NCDOT has time to send a report to the North Carolina legislature to basically explain why we should not have to pay back the state $64 million for their own due diligence on their own project, that then when they solicited feedback, we said no. And then after the residents said no, like, come up with a better solution, then the state legislature is trying to play hardball. And then once that report gets sent in, then the North Carolina legislature will give us, I guess, another 90-day grace period for then NCDOT to also come up with alternate solutions. So all that to say, we're not completely screwed. And also, just to put it all I looked up what is the Charlotte city budget, just to put this in perspective. So $64 million, not a trifling small amount by any means. But even if Charlotte had to pay all of it, which we wouldn't, we'd only have to pay, I think, $25 million out of the 60. It still would be a fraction of 1 percentage point out of $4.5 billion, which is the entire budget. So 77's got to get figured out, but we're not completely screwed on that. The data centers thing he talked about was super interesting, though, because I've not heard anybody really talk about this directly, especially from a leadership perspective. But there's a couple things I still wanted to touch on, a couple of quotes that he said specifically about the I-77 project. And quote, "I've intentionally maintained a position of not taking a position pro or con on the I-77 project because my primary goal is to make sure that the community has the information, gets to share the information, digest the information, and engage folks from both the city, both the council and the actual community to help make a decision. We need to be able to look back 2 years from now, 5 years from now, and say we took the information we had and we made a reasonable decision." And he echoed multiple different times that his initial pledge, because he's only serving an 18-month term, he echoed, I counted, I don't know, at least 5 times that he echoed he will not rerun, which, since we all know, And there's a lot of distrust with politicians these days, and he seemed very, very earnest from this. I recommend going and actually watching the video. It's tuesdayforumcharlotte.org, and you can go find it there. Um, so since the city council, after the outcry from the community, just to give you a quick recap, everybody said this is a terrible solution. You're going to bulldoze a bunch of historic neighborhoods, and it still is not really a good solution for the city of Charlotte as a whole. The city council responded to the community by then withdrawing their support. When they did that, the CRTPO, or the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization, which is the federal organization responsible, made up of all the people that actually live here, right, to work together to figure out how to plan our transit and transportation here. They responded to the city council killing support for the project by then them saying, hey, if the city's not on board, we're not on board either. We're also killing the project. Ironically, the city council doesn't actually have direct authority to kill it, but the CRTPO, the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization, they do have the authority to kill the project. When they killed the project, that was when a handful, really one in particular, state legislator, then put in an amendment into the state budget saying that the local governments would have to repay the costs for all the planning and design that went into, which was the $64 million, which if you, mind you, I am an engineer, right? That sounds like an atrocious number. It is a very big number, but given relative, because we did this on another live stream the other day, 64 million relative to the size of that project actually is maybe a little bit expensive, but it's actually pretty accurate for what it would cost relative to the size of the project to actually design and do the due diligence, because it's a big project. It's like a $4 billion project. So you think about that, it's like, let's say you're renovating your house, you're doing a $100,000 renovation. If you have somebody do a bunch of design work, put together drawings and everything, it could be $500 to $1,000. So 64 million on 4 billion, you're just adding zeros. It's not that crazy because there's a lot of design work and research that goes into that. Anyways, I digress. So it was Iredell's Vicky Sawyer put the budget amendment in. It did pass because the state needed to get a budget pushed through, so it got latched onto that bill and just got jammed through. Afterwards, and this is again for that $64 million that would have to be repaid, every different area around Charlotte had a different reaction. So Monroe freaked out and reversed their opposition to then support putting the toll lanes back through. Huntersville, Davidson, and Matthews hadn't reviewed it yet as of when they got reached out to. And Charlotte, Cornelius, and Mint Hill did not respond to requests for comment. I suspect Charlotte's just waiting to see how this plays out. Cornelius is probably too rich to care, and Mint Hill was probably gone fishing. LOL. Anyways, so basically, the local governments appear to be standing their ground, and the new mayor for Charlotte, again, is trying to not personally take a stance so much as just make sure that everybody that wants to be heard through this process gets a chance to be heard. And if the consensus locally is that we will stand our ground and pay the cost, so be it. I think that's a reasonable take. But anyways, so again, data centers was the next thing that we talked about. And this was also, again, one of the most interesting takes that I've heard so far, particularly because given how he did not have much of an opinion on anything, he actually did have an opinion on data centers. And that was, he said, there are two things that we have to absolutely do as we are regulating data centers in Charlotte, and that we have to do it with urgency, or regulate with urgency, so that, and I quote, our ability to regulate keeps up with the development here. And the two things that he said he wanted to see were that the environmental and community impacts are minimized, and the upsides of AI are maximized, and we're able to capture as much of that as possible. Again, a very reasonable take, but it was interesting given that there were a lot of non-takes through this. One of the other things that we talked about as well was growth and housing affordability. I pulled some interesting stats because Charlotte is the fastest growing metro in the nation currently, adding 20,731 residents between July of 2024 and July of 2025. I wondered where the new numbers were going to come in, where we would get, 25 through July of 26. Those unfortunately will not be released until April or May of 2027. So this is the most up-to-date data that we have because it's only a couple months old, even though it is close to a year old. Anyways, we edged out Fort Worth, San Antonio, Salina, Texas, Seattle, Houston, Nashville, Port St. Lucie or PSL, Florida, and McKinney. So, but interestingly, it was not actually the fastest growing, and this is a little bit unrelated to Rob specifically, but I'll circle back on this. Fort Mill actually was the fastest growing town in the region, growing with a 63.7% increase in median price in 2026 versus 2021, whereas Charlotte only saw a 51%, still huge, right, but like lesser, 51% increase in median home price from 2021 to 2026, so a 5-year time period. We have currently 157 people per day moving to the region, many of them deciding to actually stay, and like very, very few people choosing to leave, which is one of the reasons why we're, again, the fastest growing area or city in the United States currently. And we also have a ton of the suburbs around the city also being ranked as some of the fastest growing towns instead of a city, right? Cities being larger, towns being smaller. Some of the fastest growing towns in the entire country, particularly York, South Carolina, and Fort Mill, South Carolina. The biggest thing he was talking about was getting affordability and plans for that. We didn't get a whole lot that was real specific. The biggest things being trying to get more collaborations, especially between public-private partnerships and mixed income housing. The biggest recurring theme, we'll get to the safety thing, especially on the teen takeovers / teen party violence, like craziness this summer, whatever they're calling. I don't know if you've seen it on the news. I hadn't until I learned about this. There's been some pretty crazy instances that we'll cover here in just one second. But the biggest recurring theme was talking about trying to get a lot of community involvement and then also council involvement and discussion and debate between the two in making decisions for the community so that as the city council makes decisions, it is most reflective of the constituents, the people that actually live here, and that the city council is actually acting on behalf of the people that live here. Also, interesting thing, so the mayor is a non-voting member of the city council, and so I believe he has the power to decide basically what ends up on the discussion and voting docket, but he is not actually voting himself. Also, 120 people applied to be mayor, 69 met the qualifications, and he was selected from then 5 finalists by the city council. So, pretty cool. Teen takeovers. So major cities have been struggling with this, Charlotte as well. There's an incident in June at Romare Bearden Park involving, I believe, like several hundred teens that were out after curfew. And then there was an incident in July on the boardwalk in University with multiple fights, violence. Like it was crazy, and I believe it was over 300 people were there. And this has become a hot topic in the community. And in a hearing related to, and also something that he commented on, which is how we got on this topic, he commented on this. So in one of the city council hearings, the police chief specifically mentioned that it's hard to enforce the current curfew, which is because it is a tiered curfew. This also blew my mind. So currently, there's an under 13 curfew of being home by 10 p.m. 13 to 15-year-olds have a curfew of 11 p.m. 16 and 17-year-olds have no curfew. However, how the hell are you going to ID somebody if they're 12 and they don't have an ID to know that they're 12? They can look 12, but you can't enforce it anyways. So Patterson said that because it is hard to determine the exact age of juveniles without an ID, it delays the investigation, prolongs police interactions, and so the city council is going to be voting on a blanket curfew to solve this. The gatherings themselves are not the issue, according to Patterson. The issue is that these gatherings often lead to traffic disruption, misconducts, assaults, and sometimes shootings. Police are only able to make roughly 10 arrests when responding to large crowds of hundreds of teens. And the CMPD Captain Blow said, "We want voluntary compliance," which is, hey, you can't be here, you need to leave, and a lot of them do leave. It's the ones that refuse to leave and don't follow direction that cause issues. Then we've got to take enforcement action. The city council's response has been that the safety committee advanced a proposal to set 9 p.m. curfew on all nights for all minors outside of essential travel. The city council will next vote on this, I believe, Monday, August 10th at 5 p.m. And the biggest thing that Mayor Harrington mentioned on this was that particularly religious organizations and the cities like Parks and Recs Department and the different organizations that can create spaces and places and activities for the younger residents of Charlotte, the kids that are involved in stuff like this, that they have some outlet to go and do things and have something productive to do, or at least something fun to do that is not destructive. So he mentioned trying to help facilitate more conversation around that. It was a very interesting forum. It was pretty long. If you don't want to take 90 minutes and you just want the recap, you got it. Congrats. That's what I'm here for. And speaking of which, if you are looking for all things with updates on Charlotte real estate, you can add me on Instagram at Lucas Roller for Charlotte development updates, home buying tips, home selling tips, market updates, the whole 9 yards. And you can also scan the QR code right here and fill out a few quick questions if you're trying to figure out what areas around Charlotte are best for you. Answer a few quick questions and it will recommend a short list of areas that match exactly what you're looking for, from commute times to cost to amenities, things to do, all the fun stuff, whatever you're looking for. And always, you can also text, call, WhatsApp me, 980-449-3750. Not even sure if this one works. I need to check it. It might be to book a call, but you can always, call, text, or WhatsApp me if you're international. My name's Lucas Roller. I'm your favorite realtor, I hope, here in the beautiful Queen City. Love to keep you updated on all such things. And if you got questions, leave them in the comments. I read every single one and respond to all of them. Hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will catch you in the next one.